Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 125 of Humanity Rising. Humanity Rising is an initiative of Ubiquity University and nearly 350 organizations now that have come together in the midst of this pandemic to create a global commons so that each day people from around the world can come together to share their experiences and share their solutions, talk about new ideas, new narratives, and confer on how we can increase our strategic effectiveness so that we can ensure that the post-pandemic world is more sustainable and resilient and abundant and healthy and in alignment with natural systems. Each day I try to bring into the conversation various events that have happened, mostly in the last 24 hours. I've been emphasizing over the last week, 10 days, that the COVID-19 cases are going up almost everywhere around the world, and that the different countries are taking different tactics to try to stop the spread. Last session, I talked about what the Europeans are now calling circuit breaker lockdowns, where instead of lockdowns indefinitely into the future, they're announcing, as Ireland did, 6 weeks, or Northern Ireland 4 weeks, or Wales 12 days, the Czech Republic, I think it was 20 days. And the United States, unique in the world, as the country that has the highest COVID rate and death rate of any country in the world. 4% of the human population and over 20% of the cases and the deaths. Now, I think it's up to 226,000 deaths in the last 6 months. Mark Meadows, the chief of staff of President Trump, announced yesterday that the United States was going to do nothing. I want everybody just to take that in. The official policy of the President of the United States of America is that the US government is going to do nothing to stop the spread of COVID. They've bought into the crazy ideas of a man named Scott Armstrong that Trump saw on Fox News a couple months ago and liked what he had to say, and so brought him into the White House without any public health experience. And this guy says that the best way to deal with the pandemic is let everybody who's going to get it just get it, and let the pandemic run through society unchecked. And that's why President Trump has ridiculed face masks and turned his campaign rallies into super spreader events. Now Mike Pence, the vice president, has had 5 of his closest associates, including his personal bodyguard, test positive. And he's still out on the campaign trail as if nothing has happened. So we're going to see in the United States how this plays out with the government saying they're going to just wait till next year and hope that the vaccine can take care of things. So the world is turning. And meanwhile, in Southern California, over 100,000 people have been ordered to evacuate in the face of fires that have been going on now for nearly 6 weeks. The largest forest fires in the history of California that are still burning. And one other little factoid for today, Amy Coney Barrett was forced through the Senate of the United States, a ultra right-wing evangelical Christian that doesn't believe in birth control, doesn't believe in Obamacare, and she's now on the Supreme Court as of last night. And the White House and the Republicans are rushing to the Supreme Court a voter suppression law coming out of Pennsylvania. So within 24 hours of putting another ultra-right crony as he packs the Supreme Court, they're beginning the process in advance of the election. In this case, to say that any ballots received by the voter registrar after the election won't be counted, while at the same time, the Trump administration, through the Postmaster General, have been doing everything they can to slow the mail down. And I just want to flag this because next week is this US election. And so I hope you stay tuned, because Monday through Friday, we're going to be talking about the election. And we have different people that are social commentators, political analysts, that'll be coming on the program, so that we need to just hold the complexity, the paradox in our world. So many things are happening, including Humanity Rising, including the fact that the city of Amsterdam has embraced donut economics, including the fact that Orna in New Zealand won a landslide victory last week and has put first government out there to put human well-being at the center of national policy. So as Whitehead said about 100 years ago, the famous American philosophers, Christ is crucified and the fairies dance. And it's our capacity to hold all of this in a spirit of loving compassion for the world, including ourselves. That is the key to the coherence that we all need right now. So I want to thank everybody for joining. I want to thank our live streaming partners. And now I would like to turn it over to Sabine van Gafka, my good friend and co-moderator, who will commence our program. Sabine.
Thank you so much, Jim, and for once again always opening with such wise and insightful words that both scan what is going on in the world, but also encouraging us all to really step up into the roles of the leaders that we want to be and want to see. And just as Jim said, we truly are living in a time where we need to step up as catalysts for change, both as an individual, as a company, as a community, as a society. And this also requires the need for individuals and leaders of change to step up and pave the way. And I find that this is also the mission of Humanity Rising, to really provide that platform, that ecosystem, that sphere for change makers, game changers, catalysts, path weavers, facilitators, and more, to really open up a sacred space for them to share their wisdom, knowledge, and ideas on how to really transform this world, this currently turbulent world that is in such a transition, and the world and humanity to the better. And it really requires that we hold that space while still developing our own inner knowledge and our own inner wisdom and self-leadership, as well as in a community and societal aspect. And this is also in perfect alignment with today's session. That is a session, the second session on the NextGen installment, Ubiquity's NextGen team, where we'll hear from four amazing and progressive international NextGen leaders who are really working on a variety of different aspects and areas and projects around the world that we'll hear more about. And it's everything from virtual reality activism to sustainable infrastructure and clean energy to sustainable at-home energy consumptions. All these steps and information and knowledge that we need to really both convey, but also bring back, because we all need the knowledge of how we are going to visualize this future that we really want to live in and that we want to co-create, not only create, but co-create. And also, as Jim mentioned, holding the space with loving compassion for ourselves and others, because at this moment there is a lot of different resonance and a lot of different multi-perspectives and leaders who are, in my opinion, paving the wrong way and part of an old power structure, whereas we're trying to actually pave the other way. And it's the clash of the titans, let's put it in that way. And we really need to have spaces where we can recharge and really find that there are so many of us really making change happen, but we're a lot in silos. And hopefully with Humanity Rising, we can have more of a coherent ecosystem and feel that we have support from each other. And with that, I'd like to open the space with a 1-minute heart coherence that we do every day, just to align ourselves, open up this sacred space, and to really focus on being here and now and open our hearts and minds for different perspectives, and also our own minds to receive and to give wisdom, love, and compassion. So for just 1 minute, let's close our eyes and inhale and exhale this beautiful chant. Just glide and feel the power of heart coherence. So much for joining in and taking that time. And with that, I'd like to hand over to today's moderators and facilitators, Raji and Matt. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Sabinia, and thank you for that wonderful heart coherence exercise and for your words, Jim, as well. And welcome everyone to yet another Humanity Rising session. As Sabinia mentioned, today is a NextGen session. For those of you who've been with us throughout, you'll know what that is. For those of you who haven't, NextGen is essentially a team that exists within the Humanity Rising umbrella. And our focus really, as the name would imply, is to focus on the work and contributions of young people during this time of crisis. We had an entire week at the beginning of Humanity Rising that we focused or gave up to young people to do presentations. And we had people from all around the world coming in and talking about the wonderful work that they do. And that first week went so well that we've since then had regular sessions that highlight youth and the work that they do. Last week, for example, we had speakers calling in from Sri Lanka, from the United States. And in the same way today, we have speakers from Denver, we have speakers who work in Africa as well. So we're really excited to hear what they have to say and hear about the work that they have to do. Those of you that are interested in the NextGen group, I would encourage you to please check out the NextGen group on the Ubiverse. So please do go on there and engage with us if you'd like to. And as always, we have the chat going on that'll be live throughout the session. Feel free to type your questions in there as speakers move along. Matt and I will keep a keen eye on the chat box, and we will try to incorporate as many of your questions as we possibly can once the speakers have finished their presentations. And so here we go. Today's Global Spotlight, as we like to call it, focuses on the work of young people around the world. And with that, Matt, I think I'll hand over to you to introduce our first speaker.
Great. Thanks so much, Raji. I feel called to just say a few words in response to Jim and Sabinia's opening message. I was inspired by the notion of moving through hyper-complexity with love and compassion. And I read a really incredible book recently called The Surrender Experiment by an author named Michael Singer. And it talks about surrender as a strategy for going through life and following our path. Just wanted to put that out there into the ether. If anyone's looking for something that's next, he also wrote a book called The Untethered Soul, which was quite fantastic as well. Lots of wisdom that was meaningful for me in my life. But the Surrender Experiment, I think, can offer one solution for how we can live our lives on a day-to-day basis. That being said, it's also very important that we work to make the world a better place. And I'm so excited to be here with dear friends and really incredible leaders that are doing fascinating things all over the world. And we're going to start by hearing from Judith Joan Walker, who is the COO of Africa Clean Energy, which is a company that works with manufacturing clean energy products. Judith was named the 2016 Forbes Top 30 Under 30 European Social Entrepreneur, winner of the Chivas Venture Netherlands 2017, and of the Ashden Awards in 2017 for clean energy and women and girls category. That's just a few of the things that spotlight her resume, but I want to spend as much time possible hearing directly from her. So Judith, thanks so much for being here with us today. And we'll hand it over to you now to talk us through a little bit about what you're doing at Africa Clean Energy. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Matt, and for all of the wise words so far. Yeah, it's my great pleasure to be here and tell you guys a little bit about what I do with African Clean Energy. I actually have some slides prepared. I wanted to share just some imagery as well, so that everyone can get a better idea and tell you a little bit about what we do. But I'll start just with me. Hi, I'm Judith Joan Walker. I'm the COO of African Clean Energy. And indeed, our focus is on the manufacture and distribution of clean energy products in order to make energy access a reality and make it affordable, with a specific focus on Sustainable Development Goal 7, which is affordable and clean energy. And those two together are very important to us. And we also look at connectivity. So how do we get people connected to the rest of the world and, make sure that smartphone technology is available to people because of how many doors that opens. And of course, energy and connectivity are pretty well linked. In fact, the majority of the people that we tend to in rural sub-Saharan Africa, but also in Southeast Asia, one of the key reasons they haven't had a smartphone before, for example, is because it's very difficult to keep it charged. It's too expensive to keep it charged. And so looking at, those areas is what we're very passionate about. I'm going to share my screen and start this presentation. Bear with me one moment. There we go. I hope everybody can see this, and otherwise you'll hear my voice, but perhaps not see what I'm referring to. Let me... There we go. So I wanted to start about talking about what we call the energy conundrum. And this is a very interesting thing within the space that I work in, is even people working with energy don't always realize exactly what kind of capacity is needed for things, right? And the thing that we specifically focus on is actually thermal energy. And with that, I want you to think of cooking and heating. Imagine all the things in your kitchen, for example, that warm things up. You might have a microwave or a kettle. You will have your hot water heater. You will have perhaps radiators or these kinds of things. And that's all thermal energy. And it requires quite a lot of energy to heat things up. A lot more, for example, than to charge your phone or power a light or even a refrigerator or a television. But much of the focus when we look at energy access that's being done now, but historically has been done, is focused on electricity access. And that's just actually a fraction of the energy that people really require. And so you'll see in my slide here as well, really that sort of 95 to 99% of what most households really need is that thermal energy, if you look at the kind of capacity that they need. But what's happening is that much of the investment is going into things like solar energy, microgrids, hydro, which is fantastic. Don't get me wrong, all about renewable energy. But for the customers that we're catering to, they don't receive access to that energy. And if and when they do, it simply isn't affordable. And so we find that there's just a lacking investment that goes into actually making thermal energy available and affordable to the people who need that currently are doing things like cooking on open fire, which sort of brings me to, you know, the issue, the problem that we're facing. So Africa is actually losing its forests at twice the global rate. And it's mostly because there's a lot of household energy consumption that uses wood or charcoal for cooking or heating. And in fact, more than 4 million people, according to the WHO, die every year from the household air pollution that is created by cooking on open fire and the usage of things like paraffin for lighting. These are all very inefficient ways of accessing thermal energy. And it's also very expensive. So it's sort of like a lose-lose-lose situation where we're using too many of our resources for an inefficient, dangerous, unhealthy, expensive, time-consuming method of accessing energy. And it affects women and girls really the worst. And so that's where we kind of came in and thought, well, this is a massive issue. And in 2011, we started addressing this in Lesotho, which is still our home market. We have a factory there and we have quite a large team there. But that's where we started because Lesotho is an interesting country in Africa. It's very small and it gets very cold in winter. It actually snows up in the mountains. And therefore that need for heat and thermal energy is even larger still. So it was an interesting place for us to start. What we came up with and then launched in 2014 is called the ACE1. And essentially it is a hybrid product. So it burns biomass without releasing any smoke. That's because of the efficiency. It's if you add enough oxygen to a fire and you burn your fuel very efficiently, it doesn't actually generate smoke. And it also includes solar energy. And the solar energy is required first and foremost for that constant oxygen being driven into the fire so that it burns very efficiently so that you have this smoke-free thermal energy, right? But we thought, well, if we have a solar panel, because we want this to work everywhere and for anyone, then we might as well make sure we're using that electricity component very effectively as well. And so we have an LED light and USB ports for phone charging. And so therefore we create this sort of essential household energy solution. And this is, from a lot of field experience, very, very important. And one of the key reasons that it's so important that we're addressing multiple issues at the same time is because in general, it's the electricity components are expensive and the thermal energy components are where all the impact is, right? So where you're spending the most amount of time, where those health issues come from. And where that deforestation issue is the biggest. And so creating this hybrid product that's super usable, aspirational, very clean, easy to use, you know, all these kind of good things, that was our goal. And that's what we created the ACE1 for. And then of course, there's the issue of affordability. I'll get to that point. Just quickly, we're currently manufacturing in Cambodia and in Lesotho. And in fact, we're distributing in Uganda, Kenya, Lesotho, and Cambodia. We hope to expand to West Africa. And we've done a ton of research on each of these markets. We ask every one of our households baseline studies because the goal is really, how do we address those energy needs of the end user? And so we do come to the affordability. So the affordability question is from two perspectives, and I'll start with like an investment perspective. If we want to make sure that we're making a really big change in this field, right? We really need to be investing at the end user level where the most damage is being done. So in terms of impact potential, every dollar that we're spending investing in something that has impact across the board, we're talking health, carbon reduction, lessening the deforestation, gender issues, every dollar that's spent there creates huge economic benefit from the bottom up, which is a super interesting method of investing, because it means that you're sort of lifting everybody up everybody up with you, which is sort of how our that's kind of how our model works. But it also, the affordability question has to make sense to the end user. So we're looking at customers that may or may not be living on, $2 a day. And they're currently gathering wood for fuel. They might be spending money indeed to charge their mobile phone, to power, to have paraffin lamps or candles. And they're spending quite a lot of money. In fact, in Lesotho, I think the average is something like $25 a month just on various household energy expenses. And we see that they're inefficient, right? So the goal for us is to make a better, improved system, all those benefits that we were talking about earlier, actually affordable to the end user by allowing them to pay it off over time. And I'm not talking 3 years or 6 years or something, but we've trialed this actually majoritively with 9 to 12-month contracts. And what we did is we made those repayments at a level where essentially they'd be saving more on their current expenses than they had to repay to us. And what we saw is that within, I think it's 4 months here in this diagram, the product was actually repaying itself in real time, right? So there's a deposit down that you have to catch up with for a couple of months. But after that, they're actually retaining more of their household finance than they were before purchasing the item. And this makes it super easy for people to invest in something that has a really positive impact on their life. And that's what's super important in distributing these kind of products. And I think in general with these kind of issues where we're trying to change someone's behavior, or we're trying to improve an element of their daily access to, well, I don't know, water, food, energy, all the basic needs. It has to feel super easy, and it has to be better than what the solution was before. And that's the balance that we've tried to find with the repayment plans that we've implemented. And we actually work with an amazing partner, Kiva. I'm hoping most of you have heard of Kiva before, but essentially it's a crowd lending platform, which means that any of us, we can log on and lend money to borrowers in almost every country in the world to allow them to invest in something that's important to them. And so our customers, when they sign a contract with us, they are requesting funding from Kiva as well to ensure that they're able to get this loan and repay it over those 9 to 12 months. The next thing that we did is, indeed, I mentioned earlier, we're looking at integrating connectivity. And it's super important for us, one, that we're sharing information with our end user, that they feel included, that they understand what's happening. So we have developed a customer-facing app that actually shows them their own progress of their loan repayments very clearly. It also gives them access to our loyalty program so they can get discounts on things like sustainably processed briquettes and pellets made from agricultural waste, so that they can communicate with us super easily. So we actually developed a pay-as-you-go app, and that's linked directly to the electronics of our ACE1 system. It's currently being piloted in 3 markets, and we're very excited to see that there's excellent feedback of this so far. And it allows us also just to stay very closely connected to the end users and also monitor whether or not things are working, so does the product continue working? Are they able to make those payments, and really measure the affordability of our products rather than just seeing when people don't pay. So that was the sort of next innovative part of what we're trying to integrate. And essentially the point here is as well that there are so many amazing digital technologies that are available to us, for example, in the Netherlands, where things are so easy and it's through your mobile phone, and there's almost nothing that you can't do from sitting at home. And that just isn't the case for many of our end users. Often it's 3 hours walk into town to buy your candles kind of living. And we find that unacceptable. And by integrating the really amazing technologies that exist these days, we're going to be able to make such a huge difference just in the day-to-day lives of people by providing affordable clean energy at your door. You know, we deliver the products, we can deliver the fuels, we can make sure that people have this like really amazing and simple experience from something that used to just be such a pain, you know, just a daily burden. And it's super scalable. And this is what's exciting. This is such a massive problem. So 560 million households in the world still rely on biomass as their main source of thermal energy. And we find that nuts, right? But the reason why this concept that we're rolling out is so scalable is because there is the demand from the consumer side. You know, the market size is huge, but also we're able to train local talent and provide the skill sets. We've just recently launched the ACE Academy, which means that we're truly trying to become an equal opportunities hire, in the sense that even if you didn't get the chance to have a tertiary education, we can train you with all of the skills, the digital technology, you know, financial skills, contract skills that you'll need in order to have a really exciting and a job with growth opportunities. There's just so much potential in the markets that we're rolling out in, and it's just exciting to see how scalable something really is, and that there is this amazing overlap between development work and the impact that we can have, but also that it presents so many opportunities for so many different people. We have over 230 employees currently. Most of them, I think it's all but 9. I think we have 9 here in the Netherlands, and everyone else is in the local markets. Building amazing teams that actually cater to their community. So which sort of brings me, I think, also close to the end of my 15 minutes or so, which I probably raced through, and I apologize if I speak far too quickly. I have so much to tell, but maybe a good time for either a question or, yeah, Raji, maybe something that I missed.
No, thank you so much, Judith. That's, I mean, just personally, this is such a fantastic project, and it sounds like you've really thought of everything. So congratulations for some amazing work. The question that came to my mind as I was listening to you, which you sort of addressed in your previous slide, was, wow, this is a great idea. How are you scaling this? I feel like everyone needs this in a lot of places. I'm in Sri Lanka, and I can imagine that there'd be a lot of communities in Asia that could very much use a product like this. You did touch on the scalability a little bit, but I would really like to know more about what your plans are to scale, whether you've got plans to scale outside of Africa. And indeed, in the places that you have scaled, it sounds like you've thought of everything, to be honest, but in the places you have scaled, what are the challenges that you've encountered in that scaling? And what are you sort of working on to even further reduce barriers to entry for people to start engaging in your product, which sounds so brilliant. So over to you.
Thanks, Raji. So much to unpack there. So I'm going to try and do it one at a time. So we've entered Asia currently through Cambodia. So we're both manufacturing and distributing in Cambodia already, and we'll be expanding to surrounding countries, hopefully in the next year or so. Unpacking the scaling. We are very purposefully a social venture, right? So we are mission driven, absolutely, but we also know that in order to bring this to scale, we have to have a commercial model. We're currently in our Series A, and we're close to raising a Series A to make this super scalable. And a big part of that is that at scale, once we bring this to scale, it is commercially viable. And we very specifically do that because we don't want to rely on project finance or government funding forever. But we're also in this amazing position where it's very blended. The impact that we generate, the amount of good that we can do, we see the value in that, and we wanna prove the value of that, right? So where I said earlier, like $1 in every. Investing $1 in this versus investing $1 in, large scale solar programs or for example, carbon credits. What we're trying to show is that when you bundle the impact metrics together with things that already have like a commercial value, such as CO2, we can essentially monetize generating good impact and positive, growth on the long term, and it's a big part of what we're trying to bring to scale. Part of the reason for then our customer facing apps and such is that we can, for example, start really making sustainable fuels made from agricultural waste and things that historically have struggled to compete with local illegal charcoal, for example. We can start to make those super affordable when there are people willing to pay for the good impact that people buying into that model instead of the illegal charcoal generates. And so, yeah, it's a pretty huge sort of vision also to explain in a few minutes, but essentially it's this virtuous cycle that we're trying to create where we're taking those investment dollars and the impact credits and all the various elements, and we're using that to continuously invest and grow and scale so that more and more people are able to access affordable energy and connectivity. There isn't really a country in the world where this isn't relevant. So I'm sure that in Sri Lanka, absolutely, that would be the case as well. And we're definitely looking at other markets. It's exceptionally difficult to sort of just pick up and enter a new market from scratch. But what we've done in the last year or two is we've built a really integrated digital infrastructure. And that was the thing that was so difficult. I mean, this is a notoriously difficult sector. It's called the clean cooking sector, which makes it sound sort of like a Jamie Oliver cookbook a little bit, but that's not, it's thermal energy. I mean, it's not a niche thing. It's really the energy for 3 billion people, but it's a notoriously difficult sector because you're trying to get people to do something better and change their habit, and they don't have a lot of money, a lot of access to money. So it has to be super integrated for it to be scalable. We have all of our sales agents collect data through mobile phones that goes into our database, and then our customer service call center can organize, for example, for maintenance agents or fuel delivery agents to deliver. If you think about, the efficiencies of something like Uber, those technologies can be applied in developing countries as well, and that's how we make something like this replicable and scalable. And various elements of those we're already doing in market, and it's being scaled up, and it's super exciting to see how viable it is. Hope that answers your question.
Indeed it does. Thank you, Judith. Before we move on to our next speaker, I would like to just honor a couple of questions that were in the chat. So I'll ask them to you quickly before we move on to Roman next. But we had a couple of questions, which I'll just ask quickly. Maybe you can just address them in short for us. One was about the thermal units that you showed us. How are they built and recycled or recycled? And the other was, why do you choose Samsung phones as opposed to any other kind of phone? Those were a couple of questions that were in the chat. If you can address for us real quick, thanks.
Absolutely. So we currently manufacture in Cambodia and in Lesotho, which are two of the markets where we distribute in. And we do hope to start manufacturing in Uganda this coming year as well, because we do want to keep our manufacturing as local as possible for various reasons. It's made of, so we use ceramics, we use steel, and of course there's electronics, a lithium ferrophosphate battery because it has a very long lifespan, a lot of charging cycles, and solar PV. And we try to essentially choose super durable products, materials for the product, because we know that if you're gonna, travel several hours into a rural region to sell something, it really needs to not break down too often. It needs to essentially be able to be hit by a bus and continue to work because we're dealing with people that can't afford something to just break down really quickly. We of course also have maintenance agents. We provide maintenance service. We have 2-year warranty, but making it super durable has been our sort of priority in developing the product. In terms of recycling, so like when we do maintenance, if we have to replace a component, we take the broken component with us, recycle what we can, or dispose of safely what we can. And that has been, we've thought of all those things. We don't want to have a whole bunch of e-waste being thrown out into the market either. So we want something that lasts. It has essentially like a plug and play of the components, so that if one of them fails, it can be replaced in field as well, so that you don't have to throw the whole product away because one element breaks, and super durable components to start with. Samsung is a partner that we use currently. We're not married to only having Samsung phones. Part of the reason that we work with them is that what we're trying to set up is essentially a second life program. So a lot of the time what happens is big corporations or government institutions give all of their employees a phone, and then after about a year, they upgrade all of them. And then you get these incredible sort of high-end smartphones that are being shredded because the data that is on them, it's more expensive to wipe the data and resell it than it is to just shred it and call it a loss. And what we want to do, and this is what Samsung's working together with us on, is for those large sort of contracts, we can reclaim the value of that product sufficiently to pay for wiping all of the data to a really high standard, so that there's no data privacy issues, for example, and then still make those super high-end smartphones available at a really affordable price for our customers that we're working with. So part of the reason that they're mentioned is because we're actually piloting that. That allows us to get, like a $400 or $500 phone that can do really a lot more than much lower end models, and make them available at a super affordable price and linked together with our products and with, our app available on them already for our end users. So essentially, that's why they're mentioned in there already. I hope that answers those questions.
Absolutely, and it certainly sounds like you have indeed thought of everything. Thank you, Judith.
Thank you.
We'll give you a little break now as we move on to our next speaker, Roman, who it's my pleasure to introduce. I think I'll just read your little blurb, Roman, because it's very interesting, and it makes me have so many questions just from reading it. So here we go before I hand over to you. So Roman, everyone, is the founder of Pathos Labs. He's spent his life at the nexus of media and behavioral change. Pathos Labs was founded in 2016, and it was conceptualized to serve as a laboratory where different media interventions rooted in the latest research would be tested to assess the role that media and technology can play in engineering new norms that predispose us to compassion over divisiveness, to nuance over oversimplification. Structuring Pathos as a laboratory gives us permission to dare greatly, where at the worst, we add to the body of knowledge, and at the best, we set a precedent for what's possible. Over to you, Roman.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, and I'm so grateful that a forum like this exists. I think so much of the world that we have come to occupy and how we have been led to believe that it's a dark and dreary place. And a lot of the work that we do is really focused on bringing forth the notion that we have so much beauty on our planet. And what does it look like if we focus on that? So our brains are experts at pattern recognition. We're able to see things that aren't there based off of the patterns that are being created in our minds. Our eyes are just the sensory inputs, and it's the brains that make that input significant. And the reason I say that is because I heard a podcast a couple of weeks ago about someone who was blind, but who was able to see again, not because she got her eyesight back, but because scientists had developed a device that could turn the sensory cues into data that she could feel through the tongue, actually. So our eyes don't see, our brains do the seeing, and our brains create our perception of reality, of what's normative, what's accepted, because our brains are experts in pattern recognition. The danger is that the same thing is true in the other way, where we see things that don't exist simply because the patterns, the sensory inputs lead us to believe that they're there. And this imbalance between our sensory patterns and truth, capital T truth, reality, the imbalance between the two, I think, is the greatest threat facing humanity. And a good story to encapsulate this notion is a story of the elephants. See, this was a big, powerful, mighty elephant, an elephant whose power and girth and density was undeniable to all who met her. And this elephant was unaware of her own strength. In fact, just tying her to a fence post, a mere fence post, would be enough to discourage her, and never would she even try to tug because she only saw it as a futile endeavor. So what could have happened to an elephant whose grandeur and girth and size could be blinded to its own strength, to her own power? And when she was a really young calf, she was tied to the thickest and tallest of trees, and she would tug and tug and tug, and the tree would simply not relent. And the stronger she got, the weaker her spirit became, to the point where she decided, why even bother to change the fact that I'm tied down. And that's how I found her one day. A giant elephant tied to a little fence post, just barely hammered into the ground. And she sat there broken, blinded to her inherent power and strength of her body, feeling powerless against this flimsy structure that she was tied to. I bring that up because our perception of reality has less to do with reality itself and more to do with the patterns of inputs. And the danger comes when some of these patterns are so far off from the reality that we occupy. And we're constantly told that threat is looming, that we're not safe, and that we need to concentrate our outrage on those who are living a different version of reality than the one that we're living. And we don't understand their reality because our minds have been exposed to a very different data set than they have. And our reality, therefore, becomes a very different one. And we start arguing and feeling hateful, and no one's ever making any progress because we're forgetting the fact that our world is defined by the patterns of our inputs. And I've spent the last 10 years of my life trying to understand empathy and understanding and what it actually takes to understand those who have seemingly completely different realities than our own. I've been trying to understand how we're living in a world where we have systems that perpetuate the idea of us versus them. And I started this process of thought and exploration several years ago when I spent some time on the streets, homeless, without money, just trying to understand what it was like to experience homelessness, and what great privilege I had that I could, leave that journey whenever I wanted to. But it was the sake of learning, the sake of trying to understand what it's like to experience someone else's reality just for a moment in time. I continued this process of seeking understanding when I spent some time in a slum in South Africa. Once again, when I, in 2016, spent quite a bit of time in one of the country's most conservative counties in Oklahoma to understand a political belief that was so different than my own. And every time I felt like I was this elephant tied to a perception of reality that was so far off from the real reality that I was exposed to. I was tied to a different narrative, a narrative that I had come to believe, but a narrative that was constructed. And those moments of trying to seek that understanding, of challenging my sense of reality, were some of the greatest experiences of my life. Our brains are experts in pattern recognition. And what would it look like if the inputs were a little bit different? If they were inputs that were based off of understanding one another deeper. So I ended up building an organization called Pathos Labs, which is focused on finding ways that media, entertainment, technology can be used to accelerate the rate of understanding across divides. The first couple of years I did a lot with virtual reality, largely because VR was labeled as this kind of empathy machine that could deliver an experience which placed you in the shoes of somebody else, and did some pretty cool experiences, really focused on trying to challenge the tendency to otherize those with different identities. And recently, the most recent VR experience I built was simply placing people face to face, intimately, with those who are traditionally seen as other. The piece is called The Other, and I've got it for you, and would love to show it to you for a couple of minutes, if that's all right. Let me share my screen. Hold on one second. Okay. All right, let's see if this works.
Looks good.
Cool.
If I only had 2 minutes to tell you about myself, this is what I'd say.
I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up mostly with my dad as a single father. My mom passed away.
So I was raised by my grandparents.
I grew up very poor.
Very beautiful, very wealthy.
Kind of lower middle class.
And my dream was always to leave this little village and go to the big city.
I grew up watching my parents be entrepreneurs.
They got divorced when I was 10 due to my father's gambling addiction.
So they worked extra hard to send me and my siblings to private school.
I was a perfectionist all the way through high school, and then I went into college.
I had an idea of what I thought my life would be.
But then I grew up and became jaded and mean.
I knew how lucky I was, and I could say I appreciated it, but I never really like felt it to the core.
There was more of this question that I started asking myself of, who am I and what do I believe?
Now I'm trying to find me.
I've been trying to find my true passion, my true self.
I don't know how to get there, but I want it.
I wondered if I had what it took.
I mean, I knew from a pretty young age that I just didn't fit in.
Well, if I want to be better, I have to be different. And so.
Like, we have this inherited sense of flaw that we need to work to get beyond.
It's been a learning experience for me. I think situations and circumstances breed us.
I left home, well, basically I got kicked out.
I got really, really sick.
Declared bankruptcy. Marriage broke down.
I lost my mother when I was 12.
I was like sexually abused.
And became paralyzed.
Prior to that, I'd had a negative relationship experience.
Yeah, love can hurt when you become in love.
Processing that was just a lot of pain and a lot of confusion.
It was anger, fear, hurt.
Like the whole relationship was built on a lie.
I felt very detached from everybody. I didn't really feel like I understood how to make friends.
And I isolated really badly.
That is the scariest thing, is failing and regret. I still wanted to be a part of something so bad. Unfortunately, I fell into the drug scene and the selling drugs and all that lifestyle.
When you're on that treadmill of making bad choices,
If you feel like you don't have love, you're gonna try to find that love somewhere else.
So I started going down the wrong path, hanging around with bad friends.
and along the way you make more mistakes.
So you internalize that. Not having anybody to be proud of me.
I feel like I can't get through this moment. I'm losing my mind.
If there was some way to like cut a hole open in the universe and crawl in and zip it up in a little sleeping bag, so nobody knew I was gone, like life somehow froze.
And I got to that place. Everyone's life is actually better off without me here.
How do I make the best out of a terrible situation? I had to restart over.
Maybe I should share this part of me. Maybe I should share it to people because I've held on to it for too long.
So at some point I have to let it go because that's just good for me to do.
I think that's also part of the human experience.
Sometimes I think in terms of total chaos, but also being able to identify with the chaos, bringing me to a point of peace.
It's sort of not, why did I get cancer, but why not? Why not anything, right? We're human.
Would have happened in another place and time, I may not have been able to go as far as I did.
In going through those experiences, you can hold more compassion for people and the struggles that they go through.
People are resilient.
There is an opportunity to see the sunlight.
To really understand that there isn't any space between us.
We're all just one human race, and it's a very small planet. It gets smaller every day.
People, you know, I really started to understand that there is no such thing as black and white. It's just this gray area, and we're all kind of like dancing in this haze, right? For lack of a better term.
It's a blur, and it's amazing. You know, it's all the sort of good and bad.
That's part of what makes it beautiful, and that's part of what makes it rich.
For all of us, it's a pretty crazy journey.
I thank God for the chaos. I thank Him for the chaos.
I mean, I'm imperfect. I'm human.
So yeah, that was a project we did. We interviewed 150 individuals, random individuals. And the goal was to show how, despite the obvious differences that may exist between them, we're all part of a shared narrative too. And we all struggle. We all have moments in our past that we're afraid of, ashamed of, we're trying to move on from. And we're all aspiring to find a better future for ourselves. And, you know, when we set out, you know, the goal was for us to realize that obviously, like, we are living in a reality where it's so easy to fixate upon the differences and so difficult to acknowledge the similarities that weave between our lives. And that was one of the things that we really aimed to do with that piece. And we created it. It was meant for, you basically put on a virtual reality headset and you're placed face to face with these individuals in a way that's maybe even a little bit more intimate than what you saw on the screen. So yeah, that's some of the work that we've done. Just last week, we had a big convening where we brought together 50 television writers in the United States, some of Hollywood's most prominent television writers, including the showrunner of Grey's Anatomy, of Watchmen, of Little Fires Everywhere, of Miss America, writers who are really trying to figure out how they can use the power of storytelling to help bring forth a better humanity. And we brought them together with experts in the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion, experts on democracy, experts on polarization. And we essentially curated 300 one-on-ones between these 50 television writers and these 50 experts. So we're a laboratory just trying to figure out how we can leverage the power of entertainment and storytelling to really elicit and manifest a future that we all deserve. So thanks so much for having me. Thank you so much to Jim and Matt for the invitation. It's an honor to be here with you all.
Thank you so much, Roman. Bravo, bravo. I got shivers watching the video, man. Very powerful. And I've got a couple questions for you, but I had just a few things come up as I was listening to your presentation. I heard a quote earlier today, and it really resonated with your project. And it goes, "Justice is what love looks like in public," by Cornel West.
Beautiful. I love that. I love that.
The one-to-ones with your videos, you know, it's like, you know, the other part I think that was powerful for me about it was I'm a meditator as well. And sometimes we've had a discussion about this before, actually. One of the styles of meditation you can do is, you know, casually defined as eye gazing, right? Where you actually do sit across from someone and have an experience where, you know, you share presence and consciousness. And that really comes through so strong in your videos where you're looking at people and it's like your sweatshirt, 100% human, you know? And it really comes through in a powerful way. So just congratulations on that and all the best with the project. I was hoping that you might be willing to share with us a story of an experience of one of your audience who went through a VR experience with you. I had the privilege myself of attending one of your events in Denver and was there with quite a few people, got to put on the VR headset. It was a totally cool experience. And just having been in the work and having facilitated that for so many people, I was wondering if you had, you know, an experience or a story of a transformational experience that someone had after going through your VR experience.
Yeah, for sure. It's always so cathartic in a way to host these virtual reality pop-ups where people get to experience this. One of my favorite stories actually was we did a VR piece in collaboration with Google, and we it was called Strangers, and it's 3 women who live in very different contexts. One is a Black Lives Matter activist in St. Louis. Another is a conservative farmer in Oklahoma, and the third was an Iraqi refugee who had just made it to the United States. And the piece weaves between their lives, and this is, a real individuals, real anecdotes, and spent several weeks with them each. And the story was really meant to show that despite how different these people are on the surface, they also have this common narrative that weaves between their lives. And we ended up taking that VR piece to rural Oklahoma. The goal was that they would see themselves, these conservative people in Oklahoma would see themselves represented in one of the characters who was in the piece, named Judy, who lived in their community. And by seeing her narrative as it tied to the narratives of the Iraqi refugee and the Black Lives Matter activist, they would also go through that experience of realizing that there's so much more in common than different. And so we ended up taking it to and showing it to folks in rural Oklahoma, and it was really cool to see the response. We at one point we had like a line out of, so we actually took it there on a bus, a school bus that we retrofitted into a mobile virtual reality lab. And we drove it out there, and people were experiencing the piece. And it was really, really cool to see what was emerging, how we were essentially shattering all the stereotypes and the perceptions of reality that they were tied to as it related to Black Lives Matter, as it related to Iraq and being in the United States as a refugee fleeing from war. So it was a really powerful thing to see that, like, it really resonated with people. And the reason we've done a lot more with scripted entertainment in Hollywood recently is because, VR is an individual experience. It's really hard to scale. Not a lot of people have a virtual reality headset or access to one. And so one of the things we did most recently was we worked with the creators of the show The Conners, which is supposedly, I think, the second or third most popular sitcom on television today. It's ABC. I think it's tonight, 6 p.m. I believe. But we worked with them because they have an audience that is relatively like in the middle politically, and they do have quite a few conservative people, quite a few liberal folks who tune in. And so we worked with them to write a show on polarization and challenging polarization. And so that's going to be airing tonight. They typically broadcast their show to like 6+ million people. So we've started focusing a little bit more of our attention on stories that really have the capacity for scale, that can reach people on a pretty large level. And so I'm doing less with VR, which is a bummer because I enjoy it so much. But I feel like this is a meaningful way to move the work forward.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I know that there's some questions in the chat. Unfortunately, we do need to move on to our next panelist. So Roman, maybe if you want to give them a little view in the chat. I think people would also love information on how to check out the TV show and follow up with your projects to stay in touch.
Yeah, sure. And I'll throw in the chat my email address. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me.
Beautiful. Thanks so much. Really appreciate that.
Thanks, Matt.
I'm excited to introduce our final panelist today. Sam Sweet is my dear friend from back in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I should also mention that he's the one who recommended to me the surrender experiment. So Sam, thanks so much for that. Really appreciate that. Game changer. Sam is the founder of the Eswatini Bridge Program, was a recent graduate of civil engineering from the University of Colorado Boulder, where we got to spend some time together as well while I was at Naropa University. He joined CU's chapter of Bridges to Prosperity as a sophomore, with hopes of utilizing his engineering education to make a positive difference in the world, and has participated in a number of different projects, including bridge building in Bolivia, and took over and led the team to the successful completion of the bridge project in Eswatini in 2017. Sam, thanks so much for joining us here today. I can't wait to dive in and hear a little bit more about your work.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. Roman, that was really moving and brought up a lot for me, and I'm just really, really grateful for what you're doing. Yeah, I appreciate you. So my name is Sam Sweet, and as Matt said or mentioned, I've been creating a bridge program in the Kingdom of Eswatini, which is a small kingdom in Southern Africa, actually very close to Lesotho, but in between Mozambique and South Africa. And so rather than give the spiel, I do have a short video that I think gives a better kind of framework for what exactly we're doing. And then I have a couple of slides I was hoping to dive into. So I hope this works with ease. Let me just share my screen with y'all. All right. Matt, are we clear? Cool.
Yeah.
The most beautiful aspects of this program is that while we build literal bridges.
Sam, I can share the video. You can stop because you sent me the email. We're good to go. Give me a second.
Great, thank you.
The most beautiful aspect of this program is that while we build literal bridges, we're building figurative bridges as well. We are who we are. The Engineers in Action Bridge program is an experiential learning outlet for university students to learn about the design, construction, planning, and implementation of pedestrian footbridges in rural communities in Bolivia and the Kingdom of Eswatini. We don't change, we don't change, we are who we are. So these projects act as an empowerment tool for local communities where they get a chance to be a part of their own development, and it creates some independence. They're often neglected by government resources and other resources within the country, and so through these projects they can see how organizing themselves and coming together as a community and working together and being on a schedule can really help them get things done and provide resources and infrastructure and things that their community is gravely in need of.
We get to live in a homestead, and we eat with them every day, we cook with them, and we get to go home and enjoy their company. So it's not just a come in and build a bridge type of thing, it's really a collaborative experience here.
I am Nonduduzo Dlamini, one of the community members. One family member has to be here to work just to help us with the infrastructure, because it's really one of a kind that is going to help us, as we don't have a bridge to cross across the river when the river is full. We would love to thank you for helping us build this bridge and providing us with access. May God bless you. We are who we are.
Thank you very much for playing that for me, Greg. So that is the gist of our program. I'm just going to share a few slides with y'all while I speak. so you can be entertained. Excuse me. So we, as Matt mentioned, we were a part of an organization called Bridges to Prosperity, which is still an active organization that has the mission of reducing poverty via rural isolation by building safe access and bridges where people don't have year-round safe access. So we're now with Engineers in Action because we emphasize the aspect of involving university students to give them an opportunity to use the expertise they're learning in school to be able to have an impact in people's or in community development and things of that nature. And so essentially what poverty and rural isolation is that when you have people that can't get across rivers for weeks or months out of the year, you have the inability to access financial services, health services, and a lot of critical services that we take for granted. I think a lot of people here, a few people were from Colorado, and I think I counted on the way from Boulder to Denver, which is a 27-mile stretch. You cross over 30 bridges, but you don't think about it so much. And so it's a really critical aspect of infrastructure that in a lot of less developed countries is very impactful to people's lives. And so by providing year-round safe access, you increase local incomes, you increase the longevity of people's lives by having access to these services. And so that's kind of the preface of why bridges. And so when I was in school, there was kind of maybe one or two options outside of going to work for a company. So a lot of engineering school, at least I was in a very big university in Colorado, and a lot of it funnels you towards getting an internship and having a salary of a certain amount, having a position or a status of a certain amount. And a lot of the emphasis I found in education was about how can you make the most money, or how can you, get into a career path that's going to be really beneficial for you. And what I was really hungry for is to take these skills that I was really blessed to learn and to be able to give back and have it used in a way that really benefited people. And so a distinction from us, from Bridges to Prosperity, we decided we want our mission to be about involving students, because in that way, we're kind of increasing the amount of people that are doing good work to help people in the world. So rather than just building bridges, we can inspire students to learn about the process of community development, integrating with other cultures, being a foreign entity and coming in and understanding those dynamics, the risks and the benefits. So in a lot of these places, there are not bridges, or as we found in the Kingdom of Eswatini, there are a lot of bridges that are faulty and end up breaking after a few years. So we were called to the Kingdom of Eswatini when I was in college. And we found that there was a high need for bridges, and there were a lot of communities like this where hundreds of students were crossing to go to school every day. And you end up in scenarios where if they have to take an exam, sometimes they'll actually have the kids stay in the school and sleep in the school because the rivers will become full and then they can't get back to their homes, and scenarios like this. So as we started this program, bringing out students is a bit of a controversial thing, and integrating people in other communities. And so going back to this aspect of the benefits and the risks, we found that with involving students, if we teach them good values and good principles in terms of international development, we make them aware of the impacts that they're having, both positive and negative, and learn how to listen and be thoughtful, and to see and experience and create a relationship with people that benefit so much from their skills. We can increase the number of people in the world that are trying to kind of remedy some of the issues that are being created by disparity and lack of equity in resources. So one thing that I think has been really beautiful in our program is that we've kind of emphasized this aspect of being thoughtful. And so we have to actively kind of work against a lot of prejudice and concepts of like white savior complex, things like that. And so what we're trying to do is to take students and say, okay, here's a situation that needs help, right? These people are struggling to cross a river. But I think what happens a lot in these outreach programs, and especially when it comes to engineering, you have this idea of like, okay, here's the problem, and now here's the solution that's going to fix it, without addressing the whole system that is the community, and understanding how just by creating that system, let alone having you come into the community, how those change the dynamics of the community and can have a range of effects. So it's been kind of a beautiful journey of learning a lot about community development, learning a lot about the positive aspects and the risks of kind of bringing a foreign culture in and exposing people to even different levels of wealth. And people come in with iPhones and things like that, you know, and we have to kind of actively work on that. I think that community development is actually a very complex thing. And I think that amongst many things, being thoughtful is one of the most important things. And so that's what I'm grateful for, having created this program involving students and getting to really plant that seed for people that, yes, we should help people, and also good intentions can still result in harmful impacts. So we involve students to increase the number of people that want to be doing good things with their skills in the world. And we try to really instill principles of being thoughtful and looking at the whole community as a system of a lot of inputs and outputs, and not just seeing an issue and providing a technical solution. And so I also wanted to touch on one other aspect, because in building this program, I think there is, for me, it's like there's the student component. We want to involve students. We want to grow this pie of people that are going out into the world and doing good work. And then there's the aspect of sustainability. And are you doing something that is purely a positive opportunity for students? But what about sustainability, local impact, their ability to actually help themselves? And so when we went to the country back in 2017, the Prime Minister met with us and he said, I don't want you to build bridges in my country. I want you to teach my people how to build bridges. And what's interesting is we were working with an organization called Bridges to Prosperity at the time, and they were doing what was called the replication model, which was this idea that you could go into a country and train the local people to design and construct bridges. And they quickly told us that that wasn't possible, and that they had tried it for a couple of years and it wasn't working out. And they actually pulled all of our resources and pulled out of a lot of other countries and just said, this isn't working, we're going to go a different direction. And we decided to stick it out. And so that's when we transitioned to Engineers in Action. And that is when we really started building this team. And what you see here is a combination of engineers and contractors that kind of ended up becoming a family. And these folks over the last 5 years have learned all the aspects of design, all the aspects of construction, safety planning, construction planning. And so it's been really a beauty to see that replication is possible and that it's very important. You know, we see in times of COVID things, we're really vulnerable. Organizations, companies that have great demand for their products are struggling. So organizations that rely on handouts are really vulnerable. And what I saw from transitioning out of B2P and towards EIA is that, you know, things can change. And if your funding or the things in the Western world or that kind of side of your operations fall through, how does that affect all these people here that have started learning these skills and are coming together and developing these companies to help? And so in doing that, we've really integrated this program with the government. And so the government pays for the materials. The government is subsidizing the pay of a lot of our staff there. And so what we're seeing now is these guys have gone off and are actually exercising the skills that we've been training them. So this was the most recent project we did going into COVID, and it was led by all of our local staff. So this is some of the masons doing the layout. Once we had gotten a lot of the structure up, we pulled up the cables, and actually the quality of the masonry with these guys has really improved. They have passion about it. It's a bit of an art for them. And so, you know, in a short span of 5 years, I think there's still a lot of work to do. I think there's a lot of components of thinking critically that are really hard to instill. You can do the right thing, but then engineering is easy when the world is ideal, but it's when the circumstances change that we have to make difficult decisions and think critically. So we're still working towards that. I've recently resigned, and there's a new person heading off to Eswatini next week. And so it's been a really beautiful process to grow something that is helping a lot of people, and that it is continuing to grow and become more sustainable within the country. And so I would leave it with this notion that it's not perhaps so much what we do, but it's how we do it. And what I've found is that throughout this experience, you know, just leading kind of with your heart, actually. There's all these technical aspects of creating a program, but really it was the relationships and caring about the people and them caring about us. And that's really what made this thing grow. And so we're hoping to inspire more students to take a hold of this kind of opportunity and continue to grow with it, and to not only bring people together and communities together via a physical bridge, but, you know, figuratively really bringing the world together. We're more global than we've ever been, and it's time that we see that we're just like a body, and when the foot is hurting, the hand must reach down to help. And so I think we're just getting more dexterity in, you know, understanding this global being that we are, and how to help each other. I want to say thank you. I'm a little flustered. I've actually, one of these guys that is a part of our family has just passed, and it's been a really emotional week because there's such a deep connection when you work with people for so long and do really meaningful work. So I want to really just dedicate this to Joe Sturtwala, who is my brother and was a really amazing bridge builder. And I just want to thank you all for being here and doing all the amazing work you're doing. So thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Sam. Truly inspiring. Congratulations on the program and leaving it in great shape to do, you know, work continuing on here into the future. And yes, sorry for your loss. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. That's not easy. And to dedicate that, I think is a beautiful thing. Unfortunately, we're at our time. So Sam, don't have any time for follow-up questions today. But if you're interested in putting some links in the chat for people to follow up with the work that you're doing, maybe your future journey, I'm sure people would love that. And Roman, Sam, Judith, thank you all so much. Really inspiring to see all the projects that you're working on out there in the world. And at this point, I would like to toss it back over to Sabinia to help us close our panel, and Jim. So thanks so much, everyone. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much. And I really want to echo Matt's words. Thank you so much, Judith, Romain, Sam, Raji, and Matt. I mean, really showcasing examples for being those catalysts that the world really needs, and the bridge builders, and also conveying the projects that are so heartfelt, but that really are the game changers of how we can navigate ourselves forward to really changing this world for the better, but also connecting to the fact that connection and belonging is so at the core of humanity. And it sort of surfaces even more when now we're transitioning into really trying to co-create together in this interconnected world, that belonging in connection and communication and creating a new narrative, and also understanding that our words are also energy. So I think with this new narrative that you've also all touched upon, it really is a part of co-creating words so that we connect more and see our similarities more as opposed to our differences. And there was so much that was brought to the surface here. And I also really was touched by, Romain, what you showed, the movie that you'd made with all the voices and the faces and the diversity of all people and their sorrows or their love or their reflections, and how we can really innately see that we all carry the same source of connection, belonging, and finding meaning, and really wanting to be part of the whole, which we are, but we just need to connect to it. So thank you so much for showcasing the work that you've done. And I really do hope that all of this can be interconnected so that we can create that ecosystem of all these initiatives and really be the path weavers forward to the world that we wish to create. So thank you from the bottom of my heart once again. And I hand it over to Jim for summary.
Thank you, Sabina. Thank you, Matt and Raji, for another splendid session. Judith, Roman, and Sam, wonderful just to be in your company today and to feel inspired by your enthusiasm. Just want to make a special note about Sam. Sam went to school with my two sons, so we've known him for many years. And Sam, just to see the way you've grown and matured and found your passion and how your vocation is becoming your avocation. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing to see. So well done, all of you, for the vitality of your participation in life right now. Life has a high casualty rate at the moment, especially among the youth. Depressions and suicide rates all over the world are dramatically increasing as people worldwide are looking at what's happening and say, I can't cope in one way or another. And to watch the three of you just burst with life, with eros, with pathos, is a beautiful thing. And I just want to acknowledge that. Living in a time of COVID is not easy, but that is what the universe calls all of us to in fact do. And how each of us do it, what wakes us up at 3 o'clock in the morning and calls out to us with such force and fierceness that we can do no other. That's the life we now need to live. So thank you for gracing us today. It's been a beautiful thing. And now I want to encourage all of you who can on the panel to join the chat people. We have an after session every day where we just informally get together for 5, 10, 15 minutes. Doesn't have to be that long, but it'd be good for you to share more of your presence with our chat group. And then tomorrow, we're having a special report from Chile, where there's a Humanity Rising local group being formed. And it is celebrating the plebiscite on Sunday, just this past Sunday, where the people of Chile for the first time since 1973, when the US government and the CIA and a colonel in Chile called Pinochet brutally massacred the president, the duly elected, democratically elected president of Chile, Salvador Allende. Thousands of people were killed. An enforced martial law ensued for a very long time. And the people of Chile groaned under the boot of US imperialism intertwined with local authoritarianism. And on Sunday, they replaced that constitution with a new constitution that calls for a new General Assembly to govern Chile based on gender equality, which must be among the first in the entire world. So tomorrow we're going to be hearing from Carlos Presser and a group of Chileans who've been at the forefront of that revolutionary struggle and are establishing Humanity Rising Chile. Thank you, everyone. Wonderful session. And we'll see you again tomorrow at 5:00 p.m. Central European time. We know that different parts of the world are going through daylight savings. So just find out where 5:00 p.m. CET is, and that's when we start. That's our one absolute moving through the thicket of daylight savings time. Bye, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow.